Hello gamers, Power Heal here, and coming at you with another video. This time it's going to be something a bit different, going to be another general discussion video where we basically talk about Horde versus Alliance healing in SOD Phase 1. But in order to get there, I kind of want to springboard off a comment that I got recently on one of my videos that I really liked. And kind of like has to do with Horde versus Alliance healing, but it's a bit about the 2019 version. So I kind of want to address that in video format because it was such a good comment that it's just kind of like hard to address it maybe but just by responding to this guy. I think it kind of makes for a good video topic in itself, and I did say I would talk about this in a bit more detail at some point. So if you guys are only looking for the SOD comparison, then I'm going to put timestamps in this video to allow you to skip to that. But if you want to stay with me and check out the first part of the video, I think that'll be interesting as well. But, you know, I completely understand if you're just want to get into what the SOD comparison that makes complete sense. And then just a little bit extra housekeeping. So we're going to be trying to release the BIS guides for the BIS loot guides or pre-best, for Paladin and Shaman, as well as Druid, within probably like tonight or tomorrow before SOD comes out. So stay tuned for those as well, if that's something you guys are interested in. And yeah, with that being said, let's jump right into the topic. So this is the comment in question. Okay, so it's by Very Ape. And I love this type of comment. Thank you guys for commenting on the videos. I always think I love seeing people having like discussions in the comments and stuff like that. That's kind of like what I'm all about, when I want this channel to be about. And this is a very like long, detailed comment. And as you can tell, like from my videos, I tend to be kind of like maybe a bit of a long-winded person, sometimes maybe to a fault. But I do want to just say that I don't think that necessarily like long things are inherently better than shorter things, right? There's obviously a lot of value in being able to make kind of quick, short videos. And I think like where it's appropriate, I try and be as concise as possible as well. It's just that like in a lot of these videos, we kind of really are kind of going into almost every possible like iteration or kind of like a potential eventuality that could kind of happen. And I'm trying to, because this is like a new season and we don't know everything, I'm trying to provide you guys with kind of like jumping off points where you can explore things on your own, like once you get into the game, right? So I'm trying to cover everything in the sense that I want, like the idea is to like broaden people's consciousness to be like, oh, well, you know, yeah, you look at the new runes and you think these three are like the guaranteed healing runes, right? But hey, maybe you actually might want to try this or something like that, right? Like we were talking about in the most recent Shaman video with that ability they have where, you know, they can deal a bunch of damage from doing the healing and stuff like that. That's not necessarily seen as like an intuitive healing ability, and kind of like rightfully so, because in Classic, that doesn't tend to have stuff like that doesn't tend to have as much of an application as it would in retail. Right? There's a lot of situations in retail where getting that bit of extra damage from your healer may be really valuable, whereas in Classic, it might just make the fight a little bit shorter, which isn't really as relevant. But having that in your mind is kind of good, right? In the event that they actually do add something where, you know, maybe that bit of extra damage turns out to be really helpful. You skip an ad, you skip phases, etc. You kill ads before the next set comes out, right? So in the event that something like that does come, it's kind of good to have that on your consciousness. And that's kind of like what we're trying to do with a lot of these guides and stuff like that. We realize that we can't be, you know, completely comprehensive, but we're trying to get you thinking, if that makes sense. So therefore, they kind of tend to be on the longer side because you want to investigate all the potential possibilities, right? And yeah, so longer can sometimes be better, at least, right? And I think that's kind of like the direction that I'm taking this channel, is like, I don't mind if things are long, and I certainly don't mind, you know, people going to other channels if they want like a more down and dirty class guide, because the people that want like the more in-depth stuff can come here, right? And it's kind of like the best of both worlds. There's content creators that cater to the quicker stuff, you know, and there's content creators that cater to the more detailed stuff. And I think that works out really well. But yeah, I just really like this comment because it's very detailed and kind of touches on specifics, which I really like. Like he goes into like his reasoning for certain things, which is always great. And I just kind of want to take a second to respond to it first, and then we'll get into the thoughts on the SOD stuff. So I'm gonna read it and then I'll respond to it. Great video. I'm planning to play Healing Paladin myself. I normally play Horde, so it'll be a new experience for me. I'd like to weigh in on some of the Horde versus Alliance comparisons you touched on. I rated in Classic Vanilla in 2019-2020 as a Horde Shaman. My guild cleared all bosses in AQ40 week 1. I stuck around for 10 Cthulhu kills before I had to quit altogether. The main reason Shamans are very effective is due to how Chain Heal scales with plus healing power. For starters, let's compare a Shaman's healing wave to a Priest Greater Heal. Both a 3-second cast, so their spell coefficient is big 0.86. While this is a big heal for each class, it can be downranked due to high spell coefficient, resulting in more mana per healing, resulting in more healing per mana spent. Now, I think the reason why he does this paragraph right here is because he's trying to set up, like, you might look at this at first, you might think, okay, like, how is this relevant to, kind of like the opener here, but I think what he's trying to set up how the chain heal is markedly different than the normal heal, right? And which I think is like a good point, because the chain heal really is like the unique. It's a very unique thing within the realm of WoW Classic, like how it functions and the scaling on it and everything like that. So he's trying to kind of give you the baseline here, and then give you like why chain heal is so effective in comparison, which is, I think, like a really good way to set up like points when you're trying to structure something. So I think he does like a really good job here. Chain heal is a 2.5-second cast with a spell coefficient of 0.71. Not as good as Healing Wave or Greater Heal, but comparable. Now consider the heal jumps to 2 or more targets at 50% reduced healing, and the coefficient is actually much higher at 1.23. This is all correct. I'm not, like, I haven't done, like, the exact math on this in a while, but I'm pretty sure all this is correct, like, when he adds in the tier piece bonus. If it's not, like, absolutely correct, it's close enough, you know what I mean? Like, it's, I trust that this guy, since he's taken the time to write it out, has probably done the math correctly, and like I said, in the worst case, it's not severely off or anything like that. As the server progresses, rank 1 chain heal can pump out numbers for only stupid numbers for only 260 mana per cast, even if the secondary target results in overhealing. The first target is still getting 71% of your plus healing. So yeah, I agree with this, especially on the rank 1 chain heal part. Like, and the coefficient is just good in general. And then rank 1 is very strong, and like the thing that I think is so amazing about rank 1 too is like you just get so much value, I feel like, with the crit that you get, because you have that lower ceiling, right? Which means that when you do crit, you're kind of like less likely to waste all that crit and the overheal and stuff like that. And I believe the crit just gets translated onto the other jumps. I'm not sure if they individually crit or not, but like, regardless, you're still getting a lot of value out of crit. And in 2019 vanilla specifically, you ended up with quite a bit of crit from world buffs, I believe, because it was like 10, and then from Ani, right, and then 5 from Songflower, and 3 from the DM, or not DM, the Dire Maul. Yeah, that was Dire Maul, yeah. So it was like 18% crit, and I think that was something that was sorely missed from Psalm, and definitely kind of like hurt Shaman a bit there, right? I mean, obviously it hurt Paladin too, because Paladin is basically built off crit, but it definitely hurt Shaman. So yeah, like, love what he's saying here about Chain Heal. Prayer of Healing is comparable with a coefficient of 0.287, healing 5 targets. That bumps up to a total of 0.44. However, it's much more difficult to realize the full benefits, since you need 5 targets to heal, and they all have to be in your party rather than the raid. As far as a a top Horde versus Alliance guild competing for World First, and the Flask of Distilled Wisdom Horde doesn't have Blessing of Wisdom. So Alliance healers receive 792 mana between each 2-minute potion cooldown. If the Horde Shamans were totem twisting, that also eats up 550 mana every 10 seconds to constantly switch between Wind Fury and Grace of Air. I don't think this explains the use of 96 Flasks, but something to consider. So that was talking about in one of the videos I was referencing the amount of flasks Onslaught was using. And this is all like this comment is like really good. It's all great information, and he's absolutely right in pointing out that this stuff does contribute to the mana disparity. I'm going to get back to this in a second. But I just want to touch on this because as you notice up here, he says he plays mostly Horde. And this is the only thing that I have a bit of contention with, and it's not like strictly wrong or anything, but I think it's very just colored by the perspective of the player, which is natural, right? Because we all our experience is going to be like what we have experience with, right? So he's mostly playing Horde, and on Horde side, Prayer of Healing is very tough to get value out of because you have to basically have 6 Shamans in the raid. I mean, in like a guild, like I don't know how insane his guild was, so maybe they had like 4 to 5 Shamans. You obviously don't need 6, but like the optimal comp is basically 6 Shamans, right? And the reason is because their totems are group buffs, like you're shackled to them always, because when you just Wind Fury alone is huge damage increase, right? But then if you actually factor in a Shaman who's doing the twisting, and they're like, because you can twist, you can be really useful twisting if you want to put in the effort, because you can twist the the threat reduction, kind of like at the start of the fight or in periods where people's threat would naturally climb. You could twist that with the Wind Fury, and then you can go back to twisting Wind Fury agility for like the rest of the time. So you can be very, very useful as Shaman, and the melee groups just like basically need this buff, right? The other problem is they're buffing warriors, which are the best class in the game at almost like everything in terms of PvE, right? So it's like they do insane single target damage, and they have like on-demand cleave that can pretty much be used at any time. So they're by far like the most valuable people in your raid on the whole in terms of killing stuff and going fast. So to not have them constantly buffed by the Shaman is kind of like a big grief, right? So basically for however many melee groups you have in your raid, you want to have a Shaman to support them, or else they're not going to be nearly as effective on Horde side. Which means that you're pretty much running probably at least 5 Shamans, which means that you have like 2 to 3 groups left over, and you basically can't put the priests in the melee groups. This is the real problem. It's not even so much that you, like, the fact that you have to run 6 Shamans is definitely a problem, and I'll come to that later, but the fact that you can't have the priests in the melee groups, because when you put a priest in the melee groups, it's displacing one of the melee, right? And when you just place a melee, it kind of kicks that can and that problem kind of like down the group, right, in your raid composition, because now you need to add like another Shaman somewhere else, right, to kind of like buff all these people that have been kicked out of their normal melee group. And if you have 6 Shaman and you're trying to bring extra priests, like first of all, you don't even have enough space, right? Because you need casters and stuff in the raid too to fill out those last 2 groups. And yeah, you just don't even have enough space to probably bring like 6 to 8 priests. And even if you could, you now kind of need to bring another Shaman because of all the melee you're displacing in the first 6 groups, right? They need like their own group now that also would have a priest in it and have another Shaman. So you see this just doesn't really work, right? Like there's a reason why the Horde raid composition is pretty much like 5 to 6 Shaman, and like 4 priests and a druid and stuff like that, and then caster DPS and a bunch of melee. And when you don't have priests in those melee groups, yeah, Prayer of Healing is just terrible, because the issue is the things that are most likely getting hit with consistent damage, where that Prayer of Healing is like really good at putting back, are the melee groups. The caster groups typically don't take very uniform damage, unless there's kind of like a mechanic, like a meteor or something like that. Sometimes like the Anubisaths in AQ, for example, like there's examples of stuff like that, right, with the Shadow Bolt volleys and stuff, or like maybe like Huhuran. Or no, sorry, not Huron, Visk. But a lot of times you have a Shaman Cleansing Totem anyway, although you probably don't have one if you're in a Priest group on Horde, because all the Shaman are in the melee group. So stuff like that, is kind of good for Prayer of Healing, and there are definitely some spots you can use Prayer of Healing in on Horde, but I totally understand why, from his perspective, it's like, yeah, this spell is like a theoretical thing, or he's not saying this explicitly, but I think it kind of gets at the same idea, and I've had people tell me this on Horde side as well, where it's like, Prayer Healing is really, it's fine in that like theoretical vacuum, but pragmatically it's just not really that good because you can't use it. And on Horde side, it's kind of true. But the reality of the situation is that on Alliance side, you don't really have this limit of, not being able to get the Priest into the group, right? Because, first of all, you pretty much take 3 Paladins. That's the ideal situation on Alliance side, and those 3 Paladins are basically just to cover buffs, and then they do like really good tank healing generally. And then, so now your priests are freed up to not only go into melee groups, but to actually cast their AoE heals, because unlike on Horde, they don't need to be used on tanks, and the Horde priests kind of need to heal the tanks because they can't even be put in the melee groups to be able to use Prayer Healing. So that means that somebody else has to do the AoE healing on Horde, and it has to be the Shaman. And luckily they have Chain Heal is a very good spell, right? It's not a bad spell. I think it's inferior to Prayer of Healing, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. So Shamans do a well enough job healing the raid while priests take on the tank, and that's because priests cannot be spread out. But in the Alliance situation, you can easily drop priests in the melee groups, and it's absolutely fine. The only buff you're really concerned with is like the Hunter buff, and that, you don't even run that many Hunters per raid, but if it really came down to it, you could just put a priest in place of the Hunter. You know what I mean? And that group would be better off, in my opinion, having the priest, even though I'm sure the melee DPS wouldn't feel that way. But it would just be like a safer, way more mana efficient group. They wouldn't have to be getting spotted, right? Because it's so easy for a priest to just heal a melee group with Prayer of Healing, and that's something I think that people don't really get. I don't think they realize too how easy it is to like coordinate on Alliance versus how it's a bit more dicey on Horde, because on Alliance you know exactly what the Prayer Healing is going to do, right? So if there's 6, 7, 8 priests in the raid, and I'm in group 5, I'm not going to be like looking to waste my mana snipe healing people in like group 6 that are about to take a Prayer of Healing, right? It just doesn't make sense. And you can actually see the Prayer of Healing come up on heal comm, and because it's one heal, you see like all of it come usually. I mean, the heal comm sometimes is a little buggy, but it's generally pretty good about stuff like this. And the thing that you don't really see on heal comm is like the third bounce of Chain Heal. Sometimes it shows the second bounce, sometimes it doesn't, right? It's a bit wishy-washy there. So it's what I'm saying is it's basically just way easier to like plan out using Prayer of Healing to heal the melee on Alliance than it is to like plan out how to heal the melee on Horde. Like basically what's happening on Horde is like you have a bunch of Shaman that want to use Chain Heal, and they're all just sending it into the melee, and they know it's going to hit other melee that are hopefully low, but they don't know if their particular heal is going to be the one that's like actually doing the healing, or like there's a lot of like sniping that goes on, right, on the Horde side of things, and the sniping is kind of incidental, right? Whereas on the Alliance side, you can kind of just intuitively prevent a lot of the sniping by having your group set up well and having people in the raid that understand their job, right? Whereas on the Horde side, when you have people in the raid that understand their job, there's still a lot of time where you can get that crossover, right? Because Priest can be spot healing, for example, with Flash, and that can make Chain Heal overheal. A Chain Heal can make a spot heal Flash overheal. Obviously, a Chain Heal kind of has conflict with Prayer of Healing. And I was actually talking to like an Onslaught player who I think played a Shaman for Onslaught, and they were basically, I was telling them how like on Horde you're basically like fighting, like Shaman and Priest have sort of like an antagonistic relationship, and he was kind of laughing, and at first he like, I think he is like thinking I'm a noob because he's like, well, no, the Priest just tank heals, and I'm like, well, yeah, but that's the point. They're being subjugated into tank healing. In like both classes want to excel at AOE healing, right? And that's why it's sort of, I view it as an antagonistic relationship. Sure, at the end of the day, you can sort of solve it by having the Priest tank heal, but you're still not getting the most out of the Priest at that point, right? And that's kind of like my point there. So yeah, and in terms of this point, it's like, I understand it for Horde, but again, on Alliance, it's just so easy to like coordinate this and to just let your group dip a bit and hit them with that like fat prayer healing that just does like a ton of HPS. Especially like, you can combine it with the free cost and 25% chance crit. It's like Divine Illumination or something like. I don't think that's what it's called, but you guys know what I mean for Priest, the 2-minute cooldown. And yeah, you can just heal these groups super easily. So that's why I think it's way easier to use on Horde, and it's not just that it has a better coefficient, right, or that you can use that talent with it. It's that you can kind of plan exactly who's getting the heals, whereas on Horde side, like you're saying here, like even though it does good healing to the primary target, you still want it doing not a ton of overhealing to all the other targets, right? Because if a Priest is able to cast Prayer of Healing and basically top 5 people, and because everybody in the raid knows that group is going to be prayed by that Priest, they basically get full value out of that Prayer of Healing. You have to directly compare that to what Shaman can do, and it's just so hard for Shaman to have that comparable situation where they can cast that Chain Heal, where they know like all of the other balances and stuff are going to get really good value, right? Because there's just too many Chain Heals going off, and there's just like in a lot of cases like more healing than it's probably necessary on Horde side. And that's another reason to kind of support your point more about the rank 1 Chain Heal. That's another reason why I feel like rank 1 is so good, actually, because when you're spamming the higher rank Chain Heals, it's like now you're just apt to do even more overhealing, right? Whereas like at least when you're spamming rank 1, if you do overheal, the loss is nowhere near as severe, right? So I totally understand like from that perspective and stuff like that, and definitely I think the rank 1 Chain Heal is like the way to go in a lot of cases. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to clear that up in my thoughts on Prayer of Healing and stuff like that versus Chain Heal. So that's why I believe like Chain Heal I think is better on paper, but also better pragmatically because of how it heals and how you can see it heal and how you can coordinate. Is how I'd wrap that last section all up, right? And then in terms of this is like absolutely true as well, but it just doesn't tell like the whole story for me, right? Kind of like you say here, to be honest, like you say the same thing. It's this is not entirely the reason why they use 96 flasks. But and like the reality is that Paladins on Alliance, I don't think people understand like how mana efficient they are if they haven't played Alliance before, especially World Buff, because you can get like, so you have like probably like, you can probably get 500-600 int like late game easy, right? And then so that's like at least 5 or 6% crit. You get another 5% crit base from the tree, right? So that's like 11, probably 10 to 12% crit right there, I would say. Then you have actual crit from gear, which you can get in a lot of cases, right? So you might be higher than that even. You have your base crit. You're already now at like 20-some% crit. Then you add world buffs in. Like, you're literally in like the plus, like 30+% crit on a paladin. And every time you crit, you get full mana back, right? Which is insane. And your spell, Flash of Light, is actually a very mana efficient spell because it's not built the same way as Priest Flash Heal is. We talked about this in the Paladin deep dive, basically, where you know, you look at it and you think initially, oh, this is like a Flash Heal, but it's what Flash Heal is kind of intended to do is to be that savior spell, right? Where it's like, oh shit, we need an oh shit button. That's gonna, and when we use this oh shit button, it's gonna cost us, but we have the option to use it if we need it. That's kind of the idea behind Flash Heal. But Flash of Light is kind of just like, it was designed with the intention to be spammed, right? That's why it's low mana cost and like lower relative healing. But lower relative healing in this game tends to be kind of good a lot of the times because, again, like it just doesn't contribute as much to that overhealing, and especially when you can make use of having high crit. You know, you're critting like 1/3 of the time at least, kind of like endgame, and so that means you're getting even more extra juice out of that heal. So, and that's going into like a target that needs the constant healing at all times, which is mostly going to be the tank, right? So you basically have like super efficient tank healing on the Alliance side, and that allows the priest to not even have to worry at all about really looking after the tank. I mean, you're going to have some priests on the tank for the buff and stuff like that, and you want to have them watching to be able to shield if necessary and stuff like that. Like, everybody should have an eye on the tank, even if you're kind of like that raid healer, right? But just in general, having the priests like mental freed up, you know, where they can kind of like focus on pumping out as much like raid healing as possible is really, really great. And they, again, the fact that they can raid heal in such an organized way, it's just like and they have wisdom on top of that, right? And they don't have to twist, and they have higher intellect, right? Which isn't as much of a concern in speedrunning, but you know, you kind of get the picture. But like, I guess like the thing is like on Horde, it's like the priest is just so stretched thin in terms of like having to heal the tank and then having to, you know, save people with shield and spot people that are low with shield, pick up the slack there. And on Alliance, Paladins just don't have that same problem. And the Paladin cleanse is, like, insane as well. Right? It's just, like, it's really good. It can remove multiple debuffs in some cases at once, right? If you have two of a different type. It has a low mana cost. It's nothing like the Priest Dispel, and that's partly because the Priest Dispel is also an offensive dispel, but you pay for that in the spell budget. So in PvE, it actually kind of is unfortunate that you have that it's sort of like an offensive dispel, right? Because you're still paying for it in the budget, essentially, which is the unfortunate part. And Horde kind of gets saddled with that. Like, there's just no way to really escape that, right? And Paladin have like a pure cleanse that cleanses essentially everything, right, except Curse. That's like really cheap. And they don't have to, like, their actual healing costs so little mana that when they do need to turn on the dispels, it's really easy for them to dump mana there and then go back to healing and just be super mana efficient there. Like they don't struggle with giving over mana to dispels because their mana efficiency while healing is already so good, right? So I think all these factors combined, and that's why, like, the Alliance, I view the Alliance healing situation as, like, so much better, right? Because there's just so much natural synergy between Paladin and Priest. The Paladin allows the Priest to do what they want, which is basically raid healing, and, you know, the Paladin gets to feast with the tank healing, and there's no... Both of these classes want to do the same job, like on Horde, and you're also not hamstrung by the amount of the kind of like inferior class on Horde you have to bring, right? Like, so there's none of that, and that's why I think that the healing situation is so vastly different. And kind of like what I was saying there is basically that, like, you know, yeah, they use 96 Flasks of Wisdom, but the disparity between Horde and Alliance, if you couldn't use the Flask cheese, would be massive, right? Like, there's no way they're, like, I think they were already 10 minutes behind in that run. Now, they did wipe in that run, but keep in mind that the, like Onslaught wiped, but Progress, I think, got number 1, right, if I'm recalling correctly. But the top Alliance guild, which I think was Progress, didn't, because they knew they were ahead, they didn't, like, go full bore with some of the other strats that they were planning on executing, right? So the time gap could have actually been larger in that race. It's just that they didn't want to take any unnecessary risks because they already knew they were ahead, right? So, and then if you count the flasks in, like, if you don't allow the flask abuse, Horde just gets completely crushed, and it's because of mana efficiency, essentially. Like, Salve also plays a role, you know, having Kings plays a role, etc. But Kings is sort of balanced out by having Wind Fury. You know, it's like whether it's perfectly balanced on paper, that's the theoretical trade-off. But, and, you know, Alliance having Permasalve is, like, really good. But I'm telling you, it's just like the mana efficiency between the two factions is just, it's like a chasm, you know? The Alliance just functions way more cohesively, and, like, better buffs, and, like, the better utility class, basically. And also, just to add in there, like, there's no flame to Onslaught there in terms of, like, using the flask, because, like, you need to use them to compete, right? So I'm just saying that, like, they shouldn't be in the game. I'm not saying Onslaught shouldn't use them, right? I'm just saying that it shouldn't be, like, where you can use 96 Flask. That's obviously completely unintended and stupid, right? But if it's in the game, you know, you're going to use it as Horde. It only makes sense. Hopefully they'll be changing that for SOD. So that's basically the kind of like responding to this comment, and I think I kind of covered everything. But yeah, I love this comment, that's why I give it the heart there. And so how is this going to play out in SOD, right? And Phase 1 specifically. Well, in SOD, I think it's going to be actually super Alliance favored early on, because Horde doesn't even, unfortunately, have, it's like, the Shaman does not have Chain Heal, and it does not have Wind Fury. Now, the Wind Fury thing is maybe not as important because we have other ways of getting Wind Fury on both classes, right? But the fact that they don't have Chain Heal is a problem, because Chain Heal is a really good heal, and it, you know, Healing Rain is not going to replace Chain Heal. Let me put it that way. So the problem is Shaman just basically lost kind of like a lot of class identity in this specific like bracket, right? Because what they kind of look like now is they almost look like a priest that just doesn't have as many tools, right? They're, like this guy pointed out here, priest and shaman have very comparable kits when you're talking about their 1.5 second heals and their 2.5 second heals, right? But then once you go beyond that, they're kind of like a very different class. And you might make the point of saying, well, priests don't have prayer of healing either. and that's true, but they got Circle of Healing, which is arguably better, and it's way better than Healing Rain, for sure. Unless we get like fights where that sort of style heal is like super easy to use, and you can get a ton of value out of it. But I think that's unlikely to be the case. We'll have to see. So, yeah, I just think that when you compare like what Shaman got, and we'll actually just pop in like is what I wanted to do, right? So, yeah, Healing Rain or Overload. I almost think you're going Overload still, even though you don't really have an AoE heal as a Shaman. I think you're going Overload and you're healing tanks, to be honest, right? And you're letting the Priest take the raid healing, because you don't have Chain Heal anyway, so it's, And then Water Shield, this is a nice buff. This is going to help, like, quite a bit, honestly. It's a decent amount of MP5, because you can get 3k mana. And I don't think this is going to be per globe, like I said in the Shaman video, but it's still going to be good, regardless. It's going to be like 30 MP5 or something, which is actually crazy good at that level. And then here you're going to take probably one of these, right? If this actually turns out to be good, if there's use cases for it, you take this. If not, you take Earth Shield. Earth Shield's not bad, but it's just not game-changing, you know what I mean? And when you come over to Paladin, basically the thing is, like, Paladin is getting Beacon of Light, right? Which is going to be doubling their throughput. And Shaman does not have their bread and butter heal, which is Chain Heal. And I think this sets up the entire problem for Phase 1 and why Alliance healing should just be better, right? Because Beacon is just so insane in so many ways. And Paladins are getting a plus, right? Which is, it's a plus in ease of use. It's a plus in tank safety. It's a plus in HPS and throughput. Right, it's a plus in mana efficiency because you're healing 2 targets for the same amount of mana. Right, you're getting like Beacon is good at all these things essentially, and then you have Shaman that does not have Chain Heal, and they almost get taunted because they have the thing that you'd kind of want to use with Chain Heal, and they don't have actually Chain Heal. Granted, this does work with like Healing Wave and stuff, but you know what I mean. So, yeah, it's just very difficult for me to really see how Shaman compete in this phase, right? It's I think it's like Paladin all the way, and then when you have Divine Sack and stuff, which did get nerfed, but it's still going to be potentially useful in some situations. And then they have the Fear Ward if you had like a boss where that was a big problem, right? You can get a spellcast interrupt, so you have sort of like a Shaman Earth Shock if you really needed. That slot's super flexible. So yeah, there's just I think that there's just no way that Horde healing is like better in Phase 1 because it lost a lot of its throughput. The throughput actually went over to the Alliance side, and it now has the ease of use, and it's like so insane because you're getting so much value with the Beacon, especially in the 10-man, and you're able to help spot heal the raid while you're doing it, right? So there's just like no downside to that setup. It's like basically taking the old setup and improving it, because now the Paladins can help spot heal the raid while also healing the tanks. It's just completely ridiculous. And Shaman just doesn't have any answers to it to really compensate with it. The only thing that's really holding Paladins back is their mana efficiency is not completely unlocked, because they're going to have like low base crit, and they're only going to be able to have like 1 point max in Illumination. But Flash Heal is still a very Flash of Light is still a very mana efficient heal, right? Especially if you can have Blessing of Light on, which I don't think you actually get that this early, but yeah, so even without that, though, it's still like a very mana-efficient, great heal. So, yeah, I think Shamans are in trouble Phase 1. Luckily, guys, though, I don't think any of this stuff is going to be, like, hard. Like, the only time this is really going to matter is if you're trying to, like, speedrun or something like that. Otherwise, like, don't feel bad for playing Shaman. It's going to be a great class. Like, at level 40, it's going to be a great class at level 60 still. The other specs look fun as well, right? So Shaman just looks like it's going to be fun overall, and there's no shame in playing Shaman or anything like that. That's not what this video is about. And you're going to be fine, especially early on. I feel like, this stuff's just going to be easy. But if you guys, if we are just doing an analysis on what I think is going to be better, I think it's just going to be Paladin full steam ahead, especially in Phase 1, because they basically function the exact same way they did plus Beacon, and Shaman are now basically just minusing their iconic ability, right? And getting a bit more mana regen to make up for it, which is nice, but I just don't think it's enough. So that's basically the video, and thank you guys for watching, and thank you again to Very Ape for the comment. Love stuff like this, and I love to see you guys talking in the comments. So if you liked this, please drop a like, subscribe, and drop some more comments. I love to see great comments and you guys talking amongst each other. So super looking forward to SOD. We're one day away, not even, right? So super hype, and thanks for watching. I'm going to try and get some more videos out. See you guys soon.